On today's 76ers now, the Trailblazers entering rebuild mode, entering a fire sale. Could they be trading both Jerami Grant and Anfernee Simons? Could they be targets for the 76ers? We'll talk about that. Plus, ESPN released their top 25 players of the 21st century list, and there were a couple Sixers greats that I think got somewhat disrespected, somewhat slighted on this list. So we'll get to that on the back half of today's show. I am Jake Chipper. Welcome in. And before we get into some of this trade talk, we are just a couple days away here from the end of July. And 76ers now, throughout the entire month of July, has picked up the most subscribers out of any NBA channel here at Chat Sports, sitting just over 2,000 subs on the month. We're about a little over 100 ahead of Golden State Warriors today. So again, with just a couple days left, we want to make sure we maintain that lead and get that dub for the month of July. Do not let Warriors Today, Knicks Now, Heat Report, Bulls Report, any of these NBA channels catch up to us. Let's get ahead. Let's win this race. Let's grab that gold medal like we're at the Olympics, baby. Let's finish it off here in the month of July. Hit that sub button. We're giving you great Sixers content every single day, all year long. So let's get right into it. Are the Blazers having a fire sale? Well, according to Portland Trailblazers local reporter Aaron Fentress, the Blazers' goal right now as a team, as they enter, this next phase of their rebuild, is to trade either Anfernee Simons or Jerami Grant. Ideally, he said it's before the start of the season. But if that doesn't happen, could the Sixers target one of these two closer to the NBA trade deadline? We look at Anfernee Simons and Jerami Grant, what they did last year for the Blazers. And, it's tough when you look at these numbers because obviously the Blazers were such a terrible, terrible team last year. Both Grant and Simons missing time here and there. And, are they just empty stats? You look at Simons, about 22 a game, 5.5 assists. Efficiency, pretty decent, especially, from 38.5% when he's taking a lot of tough shots off the dribble. Pretty solid. And Jerami Grant, obviously we know him good and well here in Philadelphia from his days here in his career early on before he moved on to Denver, Detroit, all that. 21 points a game last year. Big problem for him has been the rebounding at that 4 position, which wouldn't really fit in too well with the Sixers, but he was efficient, 45%. And 40% from 3. You love to see that from Jerami Grant, especially when you consider, where he was at when he started his career. Let's talk about Jerami Grant here first, before we get to Anfernee Simons. It's been reported that the Blazers are looking for 2 first-round picks for Jerami Grant, obviously on top of having to match the salary of Jerami Grant. In the Sixers' case, you look at his contract right now, he's signed, for team control for the next at least 3 seasons, sitting at about $29 million this year, and then just going to keep going up and up and up all the way until the 2027-28 season, where he will have a $36 million player option. Like, when we look at Jerami Grant, it's not going to happen here for the Sixers. They just simply don't have the contracts to be able to match Jerami Grant's large salary, and I don't really think he'd be much of an interest for the Sixers anyways at that price point. Again, I like the spacing, I like the shooting he can provide, but that lack of rebounding at the 4 position is a big worry for the Sixers, and it would just even further that worry. And when you look here at the tradable contracts for the Sixers, they're obviously not going to trade Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Joel Embiid. Those 3 take up pretty much all of the Sixers' salary cap space. After that, these are the next 5 largest salaries on the 76ers roster. Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, KJ Martin, all sitting at about $8 million. Again, the KJ Martin salary, they were able to give him this because he had his bird rights, and I imagine they're going to use this in a trade at some point. Then you have Andre Drummond and the rookie Jared McCain. So these are kind of the 5 next tradable contracts that I could see for the Sixers. Again, you don't have enough here to really make up for Jerami Grant, but you could have enough to make up for Anfernee Simons. So while I don't think a Jerami Grant trade is very likely to happen, I do think it's at least a little bit more likely we could see a trade for the young guard in Anfernee Simons. Now, you take a look at his contract and his numbers here. A little bit more affordable, sitting about $25.8 million for this season. So Sixers being a first apron team, you have to get to 110% of that number to be able to aggregate the salaries, as opposed to 125% if they were below the first apron. So we're going to show this here, and I don't want people to freak out and say this is a trade that I'm offering, that I'm proposing. Just hear me out here. Oubre, Caleb Martin, KJ Martin. Those are the 3 salaries you would have to combine to reach Anfernee Simons' contract. So this is kind of what a deal, if you just look at it, money-wise, that would have to happen. There could be other things involved. Maybe Sixers get a couple more players back. Maybe there's third team involved. Obviously, Sixers would have to fill out their roster with a couple more players if they made this move. But in my opinion, I think this would be a little bit of a desperation move if the Sixers were to say, come trade deadline time, we want to move two, right now, what I project to be starters and solid pieces in Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin, and then use that KJ Martin contract, which you hope to use in a big deal. Also, throw that in here. I think it'd be a desperation move if the Sixers are at the deadline and they're still looking up at the Celtics and the Knicks and maybe a couple more teams in the East, and their season isn't going as they want. They feel we need another scoring punch, and they go out and get Anfernee Simons. Personally, I'm not a fan of it. I don't think he can fit well as a starter next to Tyrese Maxey. He might be, Anfernee Simons, one of the worst defenders in the NBA. And again, he's putting up decent numbers, but on a terrible, terrible Blazers team, can he really impact winning? Ideally, you might want him off the bench, but then that's the issue is you're trading away Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, KJ Martin. Those are three good rotation players for you. All of a sudden, if you don't want to start Anfernee Simons, well, then what does the lineup look like? Tyrese Maxey, then do you start Eric Gordon, Paul George, maybe Ricky Council slides in at the 4 and Joel Embiid? Then all of a sudden off the bench, it's like all guards. Off the bench, you would have Anfernee Simons. You would still have Jared McCain. You have the two veteran point guards in Kyle Lowry, Reggie Jackson. You have literally no wings off the bench because, again, you traded away KJ Martin, and now you're sliding Ricky Council into the starting lineup. So you have no wings off the bench, and then you have Adem Bona, Andre Drummond. It just leaves your team in a very, very weird position. And again, you have to include those three to match the money. So I'm not a fan of this move, but maybe you're a fan of this move. Maybe you think that Anfernee Simons coming in could be probably one of the better fourth options in the league if we're just talking from an offensive scoring perspective from what he's done in Portland. So, look, if you're a fan of this move and you think Anfernee Simons is worth giving up those three key pieces, type T if you trade for him. If you're like me, though, and you don't see this move really working out and being a good fit for the Sixers, type P for pass. Now, coming up next, ESPN released a list of their top 25 players of the 21st century, so since the year 2000. And let's just say a couple players in Sixers history, Allen Iverson, Joel Embiid, I thought were both a little bit disrespected with where they were or were not on the list. So we'll get into that here in just a second. But you know what else will be disrespectful? If you didn't go pick up a Paul George jersey for yourself right now. PG has been, making rounds on his podcast. He just had Tyrese Maxey in the podcast just the other day on Podcast P and talked about how much, he loves to be in the city of Philadelphia. He can't wait to get to work. He's calling out the fans saying, let me get the worst of it. Let me hear from you. So I know I'm going to be getting myself a Paul George jersey, supporting this move. I can't wait to see this big three on the court together this year. And if you're like me, make sure you go get yourself a Paul George jersey right now. Chatsports.com/Paul George. That's going to be in the comments and the description of today's video. I'll have it attached to that pinned comment so it's really easy for you. Again, one more reminder, these are going to be going fast, so get yourself a Paul George jersey before they go out. Chatsports.com/Paul George. So let's get into it here. ESPN's top 25 players of the 21st century. We'll go through the whole list and go through who they have all the way 1 to 25. And then there's a couple spots involving Allen Iverson and Joel Embiid that I want to talk about because I saw the list and I was a little bit surprised. So here's the entire list from ESPN going from 1 to 25. LeBron James, no surprise there. Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, top 5. Then you got Kevin Garnett at number 6, Nikola Jokic at 7, followed by D. Wade, Kevin Durant, Dirk Nowitzki, rounding out that top 10. No problems there, really. I mean, it's tough to order some of these guys at the top, so I think the top 10 is about right. Then you got Giannis, Steve Nash, James Harden in there at 13, Jason Kidd, Chris Paul, and then 16 through 20. I want you to really keep an eye on this because we have Kawhi Leonard in here at 16, Manu Ginobili at 17, and then Allen Iverson at 18. We're going to talk about this in a second because I have some thoughts about Allen Iverson being there at 18, followed by Anthony Davis at 19, Ray Allen at 20. Rounding out the top 25, we got Tony Parker, Draymond Green, Russell Westbrook, Pau Gasol, and Luka Doncic. You know who's notably not on this list, as you can see, is Joel Embiid. And we'll get to that as well in a second. But I want to start here talking about the Manu Ginobili, Allen Iverson debate. Because when I first saw the list, I was a little shocked that they had Manu Ginobili at number 17 and Allen Iverson at number 18. Let's talk about it. Look, you can take a look at some of their career accomplishments, right? Obviously, AI never got the championship that Manu has 4 of in his career with the Spurs. But when you look at some of these individual accomplishments, I mean, Manu, a great, great player. I don't want this to be a conversation of me taking away from Manu Ginobili because I think Manu Ginobili is an all-time great. I mean, 2-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, 2007-08 Sixth Man of the Year. And he was top 8 in Sixth Man of the Year voting 9 times in his career. But, AI has the MVP. 11-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA, 3-time scoring champ, 2-time All-Star MVP. I mean, those are just things that Manu Ginobili was never put in a position to do. Allen Iverson was the leader and carrying the Sixers team for year after year after year, just absolutely willed them to a finals appearance where Manu Ginobili, was always on these stacked teams with the San Antonio Spurs, never had to be relied upon to do the things Allen Iverson did, but excelled very much so in his role and, probably could have even put up more numbers and had more accolades if he was a starter. But, credit to him, he was willing to come off the bench for all those years for San Antonio for the betterment of the team. And I also want to say this, ESPN did mention some of the international accolades as a reason for their placement of Manu Ginobili at number 17. Of course, he led Argentina to that gold medal in 2004 where they beat Team USA, and Manu was named MVP of that team. And it's very, very impressive. I don't want to, again, take away from what Manu has done in his career, because doing that at the international level, that's almost, some would say, a higher honor than winning some NBA championships, getting your country a gold medal, especially beating a talented team in Team USA. But at the end of the day, man, give me AI over Manu Ginobili. If I'm looking back at their careers and I'm saying, who do I think was a better basketball player this century? I'm going Allen Iverson. The scoring, the swagger, what he did, not just for the NBA, but the city of Philadelphia. I just think he was a better basketball player straight up. I know, people like to look back and have some revisionist history and say he wasn't really efficient. And despite, the high steals number, he wasn't a good defender. But could you imagine AI in today's NBA? I think he'd be even better and even more efficient than he was. People can have their opinions, and they're both very great players. That's why we're having this debate, because they are two of the best players this game's ever seen. But in my opinion, I think AI being ranked below Manu Ginobili a little bit disrespectful to the legacy that Allen Iverson has built. Another thing that I thought was a little bit disrespectful that I'm very curious to hear people's opinions on, because this is a very interesting conversation. We talked about two greats, two retired players. Now let's talk about two current players, because Luka Doncic was number 25 on ESPN's top 25 players in the 21st century. Joel Embiid, notably, was not on the list. And, you want to compare the two guys. Luka's a 5-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, whereas Joel Embiid is a 7-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, obviously has more years in the league. Also has that MVP, though, which Luka maybe should have an MVP. You could argue he could have won it this season, but at the end of the day, doesn't have one. Luka's a 1-time scoring champ, Embiid's a 2-time scoring champ, and would have been the scoring champ again this year if it wasn't for those injuries. Of course, Luka has had the playoff success, and that's probably where the majority of this debate will go when talking about Luka Doncic, because we know the struggles with Joel Embiid in the postseason, has never been able to get past the second round, has honestly had a lot of subpar performances in the playoffs, and also just hasn't been healthy a lot in the playoffs, where we've seen Luka, just this past season, what a tremendous run the Dallas Mavericks had, getting all the way to the NBA Finals, winning Western Conference Finals MVP. There's no doubt about it that Luka is one of the best players in today's game, and has been ever since he entered the league. He came in right away as a rookie and was just absolutely tremendous. And there's no doubt in my mind, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's probably going to win an MVP at some point. But when you look at what they've done up to their career so far, what Embiid has done in his time in the league is absolutely historic. And that's not a stretch. It is historic. Before his injury this past season, Joel Embiid was scoring at levels that we haven't seen since Wilt Chamberlain. Nobody was scoring more points per minute than Joel Embiid had this past season. He just can't stay healthy, and he hasn't been able to prove it in the playoffs because, again, he's been injured a lot, but also, to be fair, hasn't played his best. That being said, if we have had a healthy Joel Embiid, and if he was able to have some healthy, long playoff runs, I think he'd be in the conversation for this list and probably be on the list. Unfortunately, he just hasn't. Still, though, might be my bias talking. Obviously, I've watched a lot of Joel Embiid over the years, and I'm a huge, huge fan, especially what he's done for this city. But I just think he should be on the list over Luka. It's very tight. It's very close. But I do think Embiid maybe a little bit disrespected here, that Luka was slided in there at 25 over Joel Embiid. But you let me know, who has had a better career up to this point in your opinion? Do you think it's been Joel Embiid, type E? Do you think it's been Luka? Do you think I'm crazy? Type L. Again, I do think it's close, but Embiid with the MVP, the scoring numbers we've seen for especially the past couple seasons has been absolutely ridiculous. Luka's great, don't get me wrong, but I'm taking the process. Joel Embiid. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's 76ers. Now, some trade targets, some talk about ESPN's list, Allen Iverson, Joel Embiid. That was a fun little show I wanted to put together for you guys. Again, a reminder, we're just a couple days away from the end of July here. We have about 100 sub lead in our July sub battle over the other NBA channels right in front of Warriors today. I don't want to lose that lead. I do not want to choke. It's like a 3-1 lead right now. We cannot blow it. Don't go Glenn Rivers style on me here. Let's close this one out over these next couple days. Again, you just get great content every single day. Hope you enjoyed today's show, and we'll see you next time here on 76ers Now.